Who do you refuse to stop being as you age? Do you refuse to stop being the grandfather who can crawl on the floor with the kids on Christmas morning?
Last week, Greg Shindler told you how he got here. This week,
what he is building and the question underneath all of it.
Longevity is an identity long before it is an outcome. We experience aging not in birthday candles and cakes and stuff in years, but we experience it as first losses. I don't negotiate with age. The goal is not to add years, it's to postpone subtraction. Another year you get to live life more fully.
Welcome to the Neuro's Journey. I'm Steve Saporn. It's Wednesday, and we're back with another conversation. We have last week's guest on, Greg Shindler. We told his story last week. It's really incredible and inspiring. And this week, we're going to focus on what he does and what he's built. And he's been in the wellness and longevity space for a decade and has something really beautiful that he's building, and they're opening in Mexico next year. Let's start with Amara and what it is, and fill in your background along the way as you think is appropriate so people can understand. Your website says it's not a clinic. So, you know, it's a center. So maybe you can start there and tell us a little bit about it and your experience in this world, and I'll shoot you off a couple questions after that.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks. It's great to be with you again. Yeah, let's dive in. So Amara is in the Palmilla neighborhood, residential neighborhood of Los Cabos. So in that corridor between San Jose del Cabo and Cabo San Lucas, you know, there's a lot of resorts and neighborhoods along there. And Palmilla is one of the more iconic, storied neighborhoods. It's been around 28, almost 30 years. And it's beautiful. It's unbelievable. And so the not clinic, the facility, the institution, Amara, is located right there on property at Palmilla. And Amara is an interesting word. There's, you know, it's out there in a couple of other instances, but in Sanskrit, it means immortal, and it also, I saw a definition that says the flower that does not fade, and I love that for longevity. And it's the reason you say, okay, it's not a clinic, because when you do think of longevity clinics, you think of this transactional, you know, I'm gonna go down and do this and get this, and this is, you know, what I hope the outcome is. And I've envisioned Amara very differently. I've envisioned Amara to take this idea to blend community and identity with longevity and rigorous science to be expressed through this incredible 5-star experience that is Amara. And so how do you take people? Because we were talking about this in our last episode, Steve, where we talk about the questions, right? We need to ask better questions. And so as I was thinking about that with Amara, I reduced it all the way back to sort of first principles. And I don't want to design things the way they've been designed before just because, right? And as you know, I think we talked about this, I built a longevity facility and institution once before down in Costa Rica and left that business in November of 2023. So this is the next iteration, and taking a lot of things that we've learned, a lot of advancements that have happened in longevity science and medicine, as well as, you know, how AI is advanced, and been able to apply this in such a way that you want this experience and the experience of every member who touches it to compound our understanding and intelligence and learnings about longevity, so that we can translate those into innovation and research and better treatments, and then ultimately better outcomes for patients. But I said to you before, longevity is an identity long before it is an outcome. And I wrote that a couple of months ago, and the minute it came out, I knew that I was onto something. And we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, where if I identify as an athlete, is an easy one to think about. What do? I wake up and I train, right? Not training and not doing, taking care of my body is a non-negotiable, because I'm an athlete, versus trying to identify as someone who's trying to get into shape or trying to lose weight or trying to be more fit. That's not an identity. And the question that I think we need to answer, there's two, and one is just the second one's just a variation of the first one, is who do you refuse to stop being as you age, right? Do you
Mhm.
refuse to stop being the grandfather who can crawl on the floor with the kids on Christmas morning, or go on the cruises, or go on the hikes, or, stay active and mobile and participate in life? Do you refuse to stop being that person, right? That's an identity. That's something that comes in. And if you're not that person, who do you refuse to become as you age? Because we probably all have somebody in our family that maybe didn't age well, or spent the last years of their life in sick care and in a really, a fairly unhealthy state, and it wasn't pretty to observe. And so you can kind of conjure it up in your mind. I refuse to become this person, right? Or I refuse to stop being this person. That's a big part of what I'm trying to do in longevity. And so with Amara, and I'll rewind the tape a little bit to sort of go back and address what you asked me. So how did I get here, and what qualified that, and why is Amara being expressed, and why does the world need it now, or at all? And so for the past decade, I've been in and around this wellness healthcare space. I started with a company where we were doing PCR testing before the pandemic, where we were selling basically PCR tests to doctors' offices, and we were representing a lab. So what I really did was
What are PCR?
It tests the DNA of the bacteria. So PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, and it's the same technology that was developed to get people off of death row or put them on death row by testing DNA. And so instead of testing the DNA of the person, they're testing the DNA of the bacteria. And there's a known database of these in the CDC. And so when you match it, you know exactly which antibiotic to prescribe or which course of treatment to pursue. There's no more guessing. And so it's a highly accurate way. Prior to PCR testing, there was culture and sensitivity, right? They'd swab your cheek, take a culture, put it in a petri dish, and over a few weeks, they'd throw things at it to try to kill it. And whatever killed it, that's what they would prescribe to you in an antibiotic. And it took a while. And it didn't always get it right. And so you would, that's why people would be on multiple rounds of different antibiotics and they were still sick. And so PCR testing came along and made it much faster. You could turn it around in 12 to 24 hours. So it helps doctors create better outcomes for their patients much faster, much more accurate, got it right the first time, and they were able to diagnose much more quickly. So it was taking off. And we hired a bunch of guys and gals and sent them around to doctors' offices to sell these tests. It was really good. We were doing really well. And I was thinking about how to grow the business. And I wanted to expand the portfolio of things we were selling, because we had about 350 doctors we were selling things to in a few states. And I didn't necessarily want to grow the sales organization. I wanted to grow more products to sell to these existing accounts that we had. That was the strategy. And I was at a conference and I became aware of biologics. And specifically at the time, it was exosomes. And the guy might as well have been speaking in Russian or Chinese or something, because I didn't understand much about what was being discussed. But there were a few things that I understood, which was the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate that this thing was going to grow at, was double digit in the mid 20s, the high 20s to low 20s, kind of depending on which report you believed. And it got me excited and interested. And there was a guy there that was presenting, and I walked up to him after the conference and I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, you don't know me, but I have this small clinic idea that I'm toying with in Oklahoma, and I have this other little distributorship business, and I really enjoyed your talk today. I don't understand much about what you said, but it fascinates me and I'd love to learn more." And he handed me his card and he goes, "Call me anytime. I love teaching this stuff to people." And I said, Are you sure? And are you serious? He goes, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "Well, because I'm that guy. I will call you and I will ask you. And, I just want you to be sure you know what you're getting into with that invitation." And he goes, No, I really do. I mean it. And he did. And so for the next 9 months, man, I wore him out. But I was studying between the calls. He could tell that I was really trying to learn. And so when we got on the calls, my questions were formed out of studying and logical, questions that would say, well, okay, if this is happening, what about this? And so he stayed patient with me. And after about 9 months, it clicked, and I don't want to say I got it, but I understood it a lot better. And I said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to put this in our portfolio. I'm going to roll this out to a few reps. Then we're going to roll it out to all of our practices. And I did for 4 or 5 of these practices and went in, explained it to the doctors. They nodded like they understood, armed them with some flyers and some brochures and a little bit of knowledge. And there were no orders coming in, nothing. The reps, I'm asking, hey, what's happening with these accounts? They're like, I don't know. I don't think they get it. I'm like, no, of course they did. They nodded. They were, they when I was there, they could see. Well, they didn't. And it was cash pay. And doctors are used to charging for insurance, the procedures that insurance pays for. It was expensive. So they didn't know how to have cash pay conversations with patients. And they didn't really understand exactly who they were looking for to try to use some of these products. So we went back in and tried to do a re-education. And then, maybe you get 2 or 3 in a month. And it was really clear fairly quickly that we weren't going to make any money doing this. Like, this was not going to, so I call it, a pretty, utter failure. And I was at dinner one night with a doctor. It was on a Thursday. It was late at night, and I'm tired from the week. I've been driving a couple of states that week, and I was pretty worn out. And he was contrarian and aggressive about things. And I just remember being super frustrated sitting there. And so I said, excuse me 1 second. And I got up and I went to the bathroom. And I called my business partner and I said, hey, why are we killing ourselves trying to make these guys a bunch of money? Showing these guys how they can make extra revenue. We're killing ourselves, and I don't think they're really into it. He goes, what do you got in mind? I said, we should compete. And he's like, I like it. Let's call it tomorrow. So I went back, I paid the bill, got my car, drove home. And the next day, I laid out this plan of we're going to go get into the business and at the clinic level. And we did. We opened up a clinic in Oklahoma working on orthopedics. We're using biologics and cobbled together this portfolio, starting with exosomes and a couple of other tools to help people with joint pain, basically. And the doctor who was working with us, was our partner in this thing, understood these products well and really liked them and was really good at it. And so we started seeing good patient outcomes quickly. It was very encouraging. And so we opened up another clinic in Houston, and that one started doing really well as well. And then the pandemic hit, and we stayed open 4 months, paying everybody because nobody in the beginning knew how long this thing was going to last, right? We were all just sort of wondering what was going to happen. We wind up shutting it down. And as I went sailing and baka and motorcycles and stuff, and as we were coming out of it, I became aware of another opportunity around longevity, using these products and this knowledge, but at a more systemic level with patients and people than just joint pain. And again, I got fascinated and I got curious. And so we partnered up with another couple of doctors and opened a facility in San Jose, Costa Rica, focused on trying to help people age healthier and live potentially longer, and using these novel concepts and ideas. And the science was still evolving and crude. I mean, it was early at that point, but there was in the longevity nerddom, there was a lot of excitement around, where this was headed and was what was already starting to happen in certain labs in certain places. It wasn't near as ubiquitous as it feels like it is right this second, right? Biohacking was a thing, but it was still fringe. And so we opened up that. And that happened in December 2020, opened the doors in April of 21, and started seeing patients. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we grew very organically and a little bit slowly. And then in year 2, we caught a break and we partnered with Fountain Life at the time, and they started recommending us to a lot of their clients. And they work with a lot of athletes and celebrities and well-known people. And
Who is Fountain Life? What do they do?
Fountain Life is Peter Diamandis and Tony Robbins, along with George Hariri. They started Fountain Life together, and it's a diagnostic wellness clinic, and it's underselling it a little bit because, I love these guys and their vision and what they've built. The idea is there through these memberships is you come in and you get these full body MRIs and you get all of these diagnostics performed on you and these baselines sort of established. And then recommended interventions and treatments and therapies and supplements and things to help you stay healthier. So think of it like concierge medicine, but way up on steroids with and they have their own facilities in all these major cities. And so they were doing a really good job at all of this. And patients were asking, well, what about stem cells or what about this? And through a fairly arduous and long series of process of due diligence, we became their selected partner. And so we had some really cool people come into the clinic and experience it. And, you get a lot of really cool and fun conversations with people. And what I've learned was that health and longevity is sort of the great leveler, right? The playing field leveler. It's the equalizer because everybody wants the same thing. And it doesn't matter how many movies you made or how many, NBA titles you've won or whatever. When it comes to health, it can humble us all, right? And it's the leveler because everybody that came down was a really good human. Like they were interested in truly in what you were doing and the science behind it and the commitment to living healthier and potentially longer. And there was a general curiosity that it was really cool to be a part of and to see. And there was a fair bit of optimism too at the time. Yeah. So that's how, I got into this space and onto this track. And through that, got invited to speak. Myself and some of the other members of the company and the organization would speak all around the world and talk to different groups and organizations. And so it started to grow and we were measuring outcomes. We were using the diagnostics that were available and evolving and emerging and trying to piece it all together. And so you take a combination of functional medicine and you're looking at DNA damage and free radical levels and oxidative stress and biological epi-age and all these different metrics, physiological and metabolic panels and just any biomarker that you could piece together and try to tell a story about where this person was from a health standpoint and where we thought we could take them with these recommended and personalized protocols. And so that's where things started. And you could, you had a tape measure, you had a ruler, right? A scorecard that would tell you, is it working or is part of it working? And if so, what can we do to make it all work together? So that's where everything started. And then now with the advancements of AI and what we can do with data, the way that the technology has evolved even more so around longevity. And I'll give you an example. So in 2007, Shinya Yamanaka, a professor in Japan, a Japanese professor, discovered something called the Yamanaka factors. And in 2012, he won the Nobel Prize for it. Now, it was just 5 years later, which is pretty remarkable and unheard of that a discovery like that, in such a short time wins the Nobel Prize. But the reason it did was because it was so profound on our understanding of human biology. He identified these 4 transcription factors, these 4 proteins called the Yamanaka factors, that when arranged just so can regress a human skin cell he took from a hand and regressed it all the way back to, which was basically a pluripotent or embryonic-like stem cell. And it turned the whole world upside down when that happened, because we always believed that once a cell became, like a skin cell becomes a skin cell, that's all it ever can be. That's all it ever will be, right? Cells differentiate in the body. That's what makes a stem cell special, is it can differentiate. So become a heart cell or a lung cell or a brain cell or a nerve cell or whatever. But the idea and the thinking, the conventional wisdom and thinking was that once it became that cell type, that's all it ever could be. And Yamanaka disproved that and showed that you could take a cell. So think butterfly to the tadpole. Like we're going backwards. We're reversing the age of this. And we talked about lineage the other day. So, in a stem cell, it goes through a lineage of totipotent and omnipotent and pluripotent and then multipotent. And so there's just this lineage, and where you can use them safely and effectively in different.
And you define for people what a stem cell is and why it's important to healing?
Yeah, what makes a stem cell special is that it's the only cell in the body capable of differentiating into other cell types. And the reason that's important, if you think about, we all started as a single cell, right? And sperm and an egg and a single cell. And then that cell divides and multiplies. And as it's dividing and multiplying, it's becoming specialized cell types, right? It becomes skin and heart and lung and muscle and nerve and brain and all these other different cell types. And 9 months later, fully formed human. And so stem cells have the unique ability to be able to differentiate into different cell types and healing properties. And they're also very anti-inflammatory. So inflammation, we now call something called inflammaging in the body, which is just part of inflammation-related aging, or aging-related inflammation. Stem cells can also help with that. There's a couple of different ways to get them. There's 2 different classifications that I think are important for people to understand. One is autologous, right? Which just means it comes from you. And there are 2 places to get them in an adult human. You can get them from, well, I guess really 3. You get them from bone marrow aspirate, right? Go into your bone marrow and they extract an MSC, a mesenchymal stem cell, which supports your muscles, tissues, and organs, the musculoskeletal part of the human. Or you can get them through adipose fat. Think like liposuction. You suck a bunch of fat out and they can isolate the MSC from that source. And there's differences on the efficacy of those, and there's lots of different science around which one's better for what and all that. We won't go into all that. But you can do them that way or through a process called apheresis, which is where they put IVs in and they collect the cell through a special machine. They mobilize billions of cells out of your bone marrow into your bloodstream, and then they can collect several different stem cell types that way. And then they bank them. You see this a lot in cancer. And maybe it's a good time to introduce this idea of why stem cells and using cancer as an analogy. So, and this is fairly crude, right? I don't want, the science people watching to think that I'm trying to diminish or oversimplify this. But just as a general explanation, I think this works. When we get cancer, our bodies attack, our immune system's attacking itself, right? And so the idea, if you can be your own healthy donor, is they collect these cells called hematopoietic stem cells. And it's just a fancy word for a stem cell that supports and forms the basis of your immune system, which is very, very important for a lot of reasons, but certainly as we age. And when you have cancer, your immune system is attacking itself. So they collect these hematopoietic stem cells first, if you're a good donor for yourself. And then through chemotherapy, we burn the immune system to the ground with the bone marrow, right? We do the ablation and wipe out your immune system. And then you get your cells back. And I think the standard protocol was somewhere like 2 million cells per kilogram of weight, 2 million of these hematopoietic stem cells per kilogram of weight to reconstitute your immune system, in the hopes that it will form and then stop attacking itself and you'll be cancer-free. Now, again, that's an oversimplification, and I don't want to feel like I've just diminished how cancer, works or anything. But in the context of this discussion, I think this is okay and it works. So
Let me ask another question there. So is that the standard? Like, is that what happens with chemo? They blast out your immune system. The stem cells is part of the traditional chemotherapy thing. So so this is kind of a standard treatment that people with cancer get.
Absolutely, yeah. They reconstitute your immune system with the hematopoietic stem cell. It's called
Got
a
it.
CD34 positive cell. So yeah, and so this kind of helps to think about, okay, it was attacking, so we get rid of it, and then we use these cells that form the basis of it to reconstitute it, and we hope that it doesn't attack itself anymore, right? That's, again, very crude, but there's the concept. So in healthy people, you've got, all of these same cell types, and the idea and the premise was, well, why do we have to wait till we get cancer and or sick to start thinking about some of these procedures or some of these treatments and some of these therapy paths? What if we could intervene earlier and mitigate the aging process and or prevent some of the downstream illnesses and age-related diseases associated with the aging process? So that's the idea that goes into this thing. And it's the right idea and the way to think about it. If you think about the definition of aging, the one I like is it's the functional decline of a living organism over a period of time. Right? It's a pretty simple definition to think about. So I'm a living organism. I functionally decline. How do I functionally decline? In my immune system, in my musculoskeletal system, in my vascular system, aesthetically, I functionally, my skin and everything starts to functionally decline. Sexual wellness functionally declines. Cognition functionally declines. So these things, they functionally decline, this living organism, over a period of time. And so the idea I've always really liked and the approach I've always really liked is I'm less concerned with the period of time part that sells magazines and news covers and things. Hey, we're going to live to 130 or 150. If we can't figure out how to mitigate the functional decline of this living organism first, then the period of time part doesn't matter because A, nobody's going to sign up for it, and B, it's probably not going to happen anyway. So
because you're just going to be just a long life, but you're very diminished, right? So what's the point of that?
I heard somebody say the other day, and I really liked this. Western medicine's done an incredibly good job of extending lifespan, but not such a great job of extending the living inside it. Right? So think about statins and antibiotics, all the things that we've done to prolong human life, right? To get it to where it is today. And Western medicine has done that. But we haven't done such a great job of extending the quality of life inside at the same time, right? And so that's where I think this focus on functional decline is really important, because if we can slow the cognitive decline and the musculoskeletal decline and the immune system decline as we start to age, then it follows we will probably be able to extend the lifespan in a healthy way, as a result of it. And so that's where, and I think of it like this. I don't even like saying longevity and lifespan and stuff anymore because it's been a little bit diluted, and I don't want to be that guy, but I like the idea of human capability. And here's what I mean by that. Nobody wakes up thinking I want to lower my APOB, right? Today, that's what I'm really focused. They wake up thinking I want to live healthier longer, right? Like that's all. That's what I want, and I want to.
Let me ask you another question, just for because you've been immersed in this, and I'm trying to figure it out right now. So when I've heard stem cells traditionally, and I've actually had them in my knee, and they pulled out the adipose tissue.
Yeah.
They put it in my knee. I love skiing. I live in Colorado. I had 3 straight ski seasons where nothing would happen. Like I wouldn't be like injured, and I'd just wake up one morning and my knee was all swollen and I miss 3 weeks or whatever. And it finally got to the point where I did it, and now it's been 3 ski seasons since then, and my knees are great.
Yeah.
And so it's a ripple effect all the way around, right? I'm losing less time in the gym where I'm sitting around because I can't move, and I have a better lease on life because I love being out there and skiing. And so that's what I assume that stem cells were. Like, I have a problem, I can go in and help to fix it. But you're saying for health span or whatever, we could use stem cells to actually help people avoid problems before they happen?
Yeah, that's one school of thought, right? I mean, there's multiple stem cell types, and the one you're talking about is a mesenchymal stem cell, an MSC. And that's the one most people are familiar with, right? And
Okay.
I married the tangent and didn't go all the way back to the other cell type, but the one I just described was the autologous, and then there's autologous, and there's allogeneic, which is just from somebody else. And so a lot of what you see, if it doesn't come from your adipose fat or your bone marrow or something, it will come from the Wharton's jelly of the placental tissue, right? And a donated umbilical cord C-section birth. And so labs will take them and isolate them and then use them, culture and expand them, and then use them to treat the conditions like you just talked about, like in a knee, right? And that's, I kind of almost consider that table stakes in our world anymore. And stem cells, I mean, there is some art to the science for sure. Doctors are getting really good at diagnosing which injuries and or deterioration and things might respond well to cellular treatments, and then really good at knowing the volumes and the amounts and the locations to put them and place them. And you know, before we were kind of a shotgun approach, and now it's getting really like sniper. It's really cool to see how the industry has evolved. But yeah, for sure. And I love the way you said that. If your knees are hurting and it's costing you mobility, right? Being sedentary is one of the worst things you can do as you start to age and you get older, right? Because then that's just going to manufacture inflammation. And so your entire body's having a much harder time overcoming a lot of the inflammation that's happening in the body. And as we age, it's already getting less and less efficient at it. Like, it just sucks at it the older we get, which is where all this inflammaging and everything is taking root. So when you take those kinds of stem cells, help your knee, you now get up. Hey, I'm mobile. I can walk again. I can run again. I can ski again. Of course, your quality of life is going to improve, right? You're going to exercise again. You're going to drop some weight. Now you're healthier overall at a macro level, at a systemic level. And so there is definitely a ripple effect and a downstream impact of these things. And sometimes I've seen it where it's just the spark or the catalyst needed to help someone make a transformation and then in their health, right? In their health journey. It's debilitating to be in pain like that, right? Whether it's a hip or a shoulder or a knee or anything that's costing you your mobility. And so, yeah, that was the entry point for a lot of people, was really around joint pain and using cellular medicine. But now we can take it levels higher and levels deeper. So I'll give you, erectile dysfunction, right? You're able to use cellular medicine, stem cells, to help with the vascularization of the penis so that it can increase blood flow and or maintain erections with better quality, right? And so that's huge in a lot of men's lives, right? That's a tough thing. It happens too as we age. I forget the numbers, but it's like 1 in X number of men past the age of 50 experience this, and they're fairly high. And there's data, and I can't cite it right now, but it's basically this. People who are intimate later in life live longer than people who are not. And I don't know if that ties back to, sort of happiness and quality of life or whatever it is. So you can indirectly tie some longevity stats to, an erectile dysfunction issue that's overcome, regardless of the modality or the treatment, the procedure.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because you've talked a lot about identity, right? And if you're a red-blooded man, part of your identity is that you make love to your partner, like that's part of you. And I feel like if you start to lose that, then of course, like, your identity might shift to be like, well, I'm no longer what I once was.
100%.
And so I want to, because you're very, very immersed in this. And so give an example more like, so when someone goes to Amara, are they going there for a week? Is there a kind of a standard thing? And what's it like? So what's it like for somebody who's, let's say me, like, at this point, I've kind of cobbled this together, right? I've done some stem cells on my knees. I've gotten the scans and my doctor sees them. I have concierge medicine, but not at the highest level. So I have like a sense of what's going on. But if someone's walking in there, maybe they're feeling relatively good. They're not broken down yet, like, what are you going to do to them and with them and for them so that they maintain, like, I would love, as somebody who was a former drug addict and who hasn't drank for 4 years, I actually feel significantly better at 57 than I did at 50. So it's an interesting thing for me to look at aging because I'm much better. I'm lighter. I have less pain. I mean, everything feels better. So it's hard so how do you take somebody who was like me maybe at 50, where I was really starting to think, man, I might be losing some of the things that I really love. The knees were starting to act up. I was like, man, what's it going to be like to just not ski? It's just such a big part of my life. Like, how am I going to be? And then, you hear other people say, well, I no longer do this. So I guess there's two case studies, like the person who's young enough where you can see the spiral starting. How do you like head that off? And then somebody who's kept pretty good, health, and they're in good shape and all that, and they want to like you said, I think the grandfather crawling around on the floor, or honestly, like think about it. You get your kids, your grandkids, they weigh 40 pounds, right? You want to be able to pick them up when you're 80. So, like you got to work towards that. You got to make that happen.
Okay, so there's so much to unpack here, and I love this. I love where you're taking this. I want to hit the first thing before it leaves my brain, where you talked about
Mhm.
I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. I'm not going to be able to ski, right? Or I
Mhm.
used to hit the double blacks, or I used to be able to stay out all day, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
That goes back to the identity part of this thing. And remember what I said in the beginning? Who do you refuse to stop being, or who do you refuse to become? Right? We experience aging not in birthday candles and cakes and stuff and years, but we experience it as first losses. Here's what I mean. If my identity is such that, and let me preface it by saying this, there are certain times at a certain age, it's just no longer a good idea, right? For you to continue skiing the double blacks. And I'm not trying to suggest that everybody go out there in their 80s and try to take on the double. That's not at all where this is going. But what I am saying is as you start to age, be hyper aware of the story that you're starting to create around that aging. Because if you say, I used to be able to do this, I used to be able to go running, or I used to be able to go do this, you've conceded activities and certain things in your life because of age. It may be warranted, but it also may not be. It also may just be a story that you've started to tell yourself about the inevitability that it's just, I don't negotiate with age, which to that I say bullshit. All things being equal, right? All things, like you just said, healthier at 57 than you were at 50 because you made lifestyle choices. And lifestyle is still 80 to 90% of this thing, right? There's no magic bullets in healthcare. No magic bullets in gaining muscle or losing weight or, being healthier or running farther. There's just the discipline, the work, the identity, therapies which help the body do what it's naturally designed to do. Like in the case of aging, we just aren't as efficient at it anymore as we, in your 60s and 70s as you were in your 40s or your 30s. The body just doesn't respond. It doesn't recover. It doesn't, produce. It has different gene expression happening, so there's just biologically this thing at this operating system layer that's different in our later years than it is in our earlier years. But the identity part of this is also not telling yourself I can't do this anymore. I used to be able to. Those are these permissions, that these daily votes that in favor of aging, as opposed to in favor of youth and in favor, of vigor and vitality. And I have this. Hang on, let me check my notes here because I wrote this down the other day, and I love it. Yeah, it says the goal is not to add years; it's to postpone subtraction. Right? Quit taking things away or delay. At least when you're taking things, when you postpone someone's first I can't, is another year you get to live life more fully. Right?
And I love this thinking about the identity because I think a lot about that. I think it's really important. For my shifts in my life, at some point, I just decided that my identity was I need to figure my stuff out so that I can be of service to myself and my people. And that's what I'm doing. That's what it means to be a man for me. But I'm thinking about this in skiing specifically because if the identity is I'm a skier, right? That's not my identity is I ski double black diamonds. So, like I could see myself, like I love skiing enough where I could envision a time where I'm just on groomers all day and out there in the sun and being like, that was a great day skiing. Right now, that wouldn't totally satisfy me, right? I mean, if there was snow, I want it to be steep and I want to
Yeah,
get
me
get
neither.
in the powder. And that said, if if I'm 75, my identity might just be that I'm a skier. I also have a little bit of wisdom, right? Like, I don't need to ski off of this rock right here. I'm 75, but you keep it rolling. And so you're basically, if you work with your identity right, I think you keep yourself right at where you're pushing, right? Like
100%.
you always want to
And the
be
wisdom to know the
expanding your
difference. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to expand your boundary, but also understand reality, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and
Like
there's a wisdom that comes in knowing, is this physical, or is this,
yeah,
an identity or a biological thing? Yeah, and knowing the difference for sure. But I'm with you, right? Like I still go hard. I've got, 20-year-old sons, and they snowboard and we're going to go, right? And
right.
I'm making them keep up with me, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. That's still happening with me. We'll see how long it happens. But so as part of your clinic, you're working with people's mental game just as much as there is any treatment you have, right?
Well,
You're helping them understand a way to have an identity, a not just physical, but a mental interior lifestyle of wellness and longevity.
absolutely. I've designed it as, and again, it hasn't happened yet, right? It's not open yet.
Mm,
But
mm,
as this membership, because membership implies, belonging, and there's something there. And longevity is it's linear and it needs continuity.
mm.
Community helps build continuity, and membership helps build community. And I think when you're trying to create an identity of longevity in someone. The reason I like it, and the reason I'm fixated on it now, and look, I believe this, I really do, and we'll see. But
Mm.
when you have this identity that I'm a person who uses my resources wisely and invests in myself wisely, because I refuse to stop being the person who can go skiing and stay out all day, or I refuse to be the person that says, you know what, y'all go ahead. I think I'm going to hang back, right? And start conceding these small little defeats and these losses. When you're the kind of identity that says, I got another season, absolutely for sure, right? And you know the difference, you have
Mhm.
the wisdom to know the difference. That identity will drive the behaviors. Here's what I mean. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to eat well. You know what? I'm going to increase my protein to, a gram a pound, or I'm going to get a trainer. I'm going to listen to my nutritionist. I'm going to get my concierge guy and pay attention. I'm going to get my labs done. That behavior is consistent with an identity of a person I just described. When that behavior happens long enough, it creates an impact on biology. Your outcomes are going to be better, right? In your lab results and in your mobility and in your ability to go out and do things in your functional life and lifestyle. Downstream of better behaviors and patterns, you're going to see that. And what's going to happen when that biology improves is your capability will improve. I can do the things longer, or I can do more things, or I can continue to do things I love to do with my grandkids or my kids or whatever. And when that capability shows up, that's evidence, right? That's evidence that the things you're doing are working, that this identity you inhabit that drive these behaviors, that improve this biology, that improves this capability, that's evidence. And that builds confidence, and that reinforces the identity. So this whole thing is a flywheel. If I have the identity of a person who is going to live healthier longer, and I'm not going to negotiate with all of these things they say about aging as an inevitability, but I'm going to refuse to stop being this person, or I'm going to refuse to become that person, right? That identity drives the behavior drives the biology drives the capability, and the capability creates evidence. And so you have more confidence in this identity, and it reinforces in this loop. That's what I'm talking about with Amara. That's what I mean when you can get people thinking this way, and you can do it in a community. I envision, the monthly calls where we're doing everything from peptides to longevity and stuff, but also mindfulness, right? If we can live healthier, potentially longer lives, what about deeper, fuller lives too, more purposeful lives, right? And I think that's a huge part of it. Somebody asked me a long time ago in Costa Rica, do you think we can live to 130 or 150? And I said, I don't know. And neither does anybody else, by the way. But let me ask you a question. What would you do differently that you're not already doing with that extra time? Let's say, we could snap our fingers and make it happen. And that question really messed them up, right? Because you want to go to those surface level answers, but when you think about it, it's like, okay, if I had another 50 years here or 60 years here, what would I do differently that I'm not already doing or in this extra time? And it always comes back to purpose and meaning, most always. And so I believe we can blend this idea. And if you're around other like-minded people, and I said to somebody the other day when I was explaining this concept to them and how I'm envisioning Amara, I said, look, if you're going to live another 30, 40, 50 years and healthy years and be walking around as this badass on the planet, I need you to be an amazing human, right? Because we're going to create and give something back to this world. We're going to be creating a lot of impact through this. So we want amazing humans to be out there, living healthier, longer, deeper, fuller lives. Because I believe that it'll create this sort of flywheel effect where who knows what could come out of this. And I think every member interaction it captures a data point. Every member interaction, regardless if it's at the clinical level or even at the experiential level, creates a data point. That data point's just data until it's understood. Then once it's understood, we turn it into intelligence. And once we turn it into intelligence, we can leverage it into better knowledge and better treatments and innovation and research and things like that. We've partnered with some of the most incredible science minds in the world with Amara to further that along. So this rigorous science with this 5-star luxury resort experience in this world is designed to help us think, act, and become like more capable humans. That's the idea and the vision behind Amara. That's what it means. The flower that does not fade.
I love it so much because, to put the purpose and meaning to it, unfortunately, a lot of times you gain the wisdom and then the body starts, breaking down, right? And to give yourself an opportunity to say like, oh, I can lengthen, at this point, I feel like I have something to say that is important for the world, and I'm trying to do that. 7 years ago, I don't know, man. I was just another guy trying to make it in finance, and I ate a bunch of fancy meals and whatever, and so I'm really clued into it, and so I love that so much. That is part of it, and I think it would just make it a much more effective treatment to tie it to something greater. So I'm interested. So it's a membership model.
You
And so
don't have to
people.
be, right? Not every patient is going to be a member, but every member will
Mhm.
be a patient. Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah, but let's look at like the membership part. It feels like that. So you're building community. They would come, I'm assuming annually or something, and and then they're part of a community which people are talking back and forth. That seems really interesting. And just intuitively when I hear it, I went to a stem cell place and they did my knee and my knee feels better and I'm disconnected from it now. And it was a nice memory. But like to feel part of something where it's like, oh, I met somebody down there last year and now I'm still in touch with them. And what's working for you? The peptides are working, the red, whatever it is, and just staying involved and like, what are you doing with it, man? Like what are you giving back? To me, just hearing it, honestly, I feel a lot more energized about it than I did before we started this call. I love it.
yeah. Well, no, thank you. Also imagine, and again, these are just some of the thoughts in my head, right? All subject to change, but this is the way I see it, right? If you're in this community and you're thriving and you're talking, like you said, we tend to have something in common to bond over. You form those deeper bonds and deeper connections, and then people get to know each other. And a lot of these are like-minded people in the sort of the same place in life, right? The same trajectory, if you will. But imagine having an annual fishing tournament, an Amara annual fishing tournament, or golf tournament, or both, or and just engagement in a way, and retreats. I mean, it's a 21,000 square foot facility, purpose built, standalone facility, purpose built on the property at Palmilla with a Pacific Ocean view at certain parts. I don't want to say every view is so, but you can see it from the VIP suites in this incredible surrounding and environment. It just begs for, retreats and opportunities to learn and immerse and educate. And so my hope is that as it starts to become known and as people start to see what our real intent is here is to really use the rigorous science and medicine to meet this incredible experience, but with, sort of an AI native data driven, process that's just sort of in the background, behind sort of driving a lot of these different understandings and intelligence, it will result in, like Aman meets the stem cell world, right? Like this incredible experience, because the building itself is going to be, a character in the story. It's a spectacular facility that is just, again, to the level of luxury that Palmilla already is established. I mean, they set a high bar that, we have to make sure that we meet and at least mirror and reflect in our experience. And so, from the moment you have your first encounter with somebody through, forever, as long as you're a member at Amara. And the membership concept now is not fully baked, but the way I envision it now is it's really to create engagement. Because again, I believe with continuity, you're going to see better outcomes. You're going to see more engaged people. And at the top of this question that's gone for a while now, you asked me, how long does somebody come down for? It's different for everybody, right? Like, what are you coming down for, right? What age are you? What treatments do you need? Everything is personalized and customized. If you're coming down for a knee, right? You're just like, hey, I'm 50. I want to keep skiing. Knee's been bugging me. I want you guys to fix it. You could pop down in a day, right? If you're in Houston, you could get on Southwest and be down there in 2.5 hours and, get an injection and fly home. I don't encourage that, but I suppose if you wanted to, you could. Or if you're in more of the longevity protocol and you're coming down and maybe you want to do the stem cell facial and you want to do plasmapheresis and you want to do the infusions and things like that, and maybe it's a 3 or 4 day trip, and you have the one and only right there on property at Palmilla. And of course, there are homes that you can rent inside Palmilla as well that are fabulous 4 and 5 bedroom homes around the ocean, and it's spectacular. It's amazing. So in a golf cart kind of community, it's all self-contained.
And for somebody that doesn't know all the services available, like the kind of things, so like I understand, I've had scans of my whole body. I've done genetic testing. I've had stem cells in my knee. I don't know what the stem cell facial is. Like, what are the kinds of things? Like, I use peptides at my doctor's. Well, I don't know what he would say under his care, but we've talked about it before. but I found honestly all these things, and I think there's also just some level that, because I've created the ongoing nature for myself, so I'm engaged and Leah's engaged and we talk about it and we think about it and we're engaged in it. And so, but I don't know it all. Like, I don't know really what's out there. So like, what is somebody who's, maybe like you're talking about, like, so I'm 57, I'm feeling good now. If I could stay like this as long as possible, like that would be amazing. So what's out there that's even on offer for someone who doesn't know?
Yeah, there's a lot of different treatments and modalities. And, you just mentioned peptides, which can be controversial, right? Certainly right now. I know there's hearings that are happening as we speak that are trying to get a handful of peptides out of category 2, I think it is, or just sort of out of the ether and the gray area, into recognized therapies and treatments. But, the doctors, the conservative ones, will tell you there's not enough evidence. There's not enough studies that point to the mechanisms of action and the efficacy, and they're not wrong. And the same is true about stem cells, right? Like, we haven't done the scientific work that is required for the broader community to say, okay, it's interesting, right? And so that's on the functional side. And then on the treatment side, I mentioned the stem cell facial. It's just basically where you come in and do lots of different micro injections and dermabrasion and stuff, and then use the mesenchymal stem cell to come in and improve collagen elasticity and skin elasticity and collagen production, smooth out the lines and the wrinkles naturally on the face. And it's amazing. You'll see people come down and do it. It was funny because it used to be the women, and the women loved doing it. And then the men started doing it, and it became like 50-50 men and women. And if someone came down and did it, and the other woman on the trip with them didn't, within 6 weeks she was calling up saying, I want I need to come back. I want to do it because her friend looks so much better. So that's, one way, right? And it improves aesthetically, but it also improves, functionally. The ED treatment, right? For men, there's plasmapheresis or therapeutic plasma exchange.
What does that do?
So that's an FDA approved procedure for certain certain indications and diseases like Guillain-Barré and autoimmune conditions. Here in the US. And so we got the idea that what if we could use this preventatively? And again, doctors are, not all, but some are on the fence of, is that even effective? It's not going to hurt, but is it effective? So about 2/3 of your blood is plasma, the clear part that everything's moving through. And think of it like a fish tank, right? This is the analogy I like a lot. The fish are your cells. The water is your plasma. And over time, imagine you never cleaned out the fish tank. Like what it would look like 57 years later, right? And so the fish and the metabolic waste and the antibodies and all the impurities that come from outside and everything's gotten into our water, our plasma. And so some fish are hardy and they're fighting and they're still alive, but some are dead on the bottom. And that's that's kind of like the condition of our plasma, and that's the cellular environment that our cells are in our bloodstream with this plasma. So with plasmapheresis, you use the apheresis machine to remove, you don't get all of it, you get maybe 60-65% of it or so, the plasma, and replace it with an albumin, which is a critical protein in the body, an albumin and saline solution. And so it just kind of comes out this arm, comes back in this arm. And the idea is it's called therapeutic plasma exchange. You're just taking out the old dirty water in the fish tank and putting in new fresh water in hopes that you create a more pristine microenvironment in which the fish or the cells can thrive. So that's the idea. But I love it. I've done it a bunch of times.
And so you're saying you can take, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you could take 60 to 65% of your plasma and essentially refresh it with an artificial substance that functions. And then does it then become plasma?
It's
I mean,
the
is
albumin
that...
and saline basically just replaces it. Yeah.
And then how long, and so you've done it a couple times. What would you say, what changes in someone's...
Here's how I describe it. Yeah, I feel lighter, more energy, clearer cognitively, and I would say that effect lasts anywhere from 4 to 6 months for me. I've had stem cell, and I'm just super transparent. I've had stem cell infusions where I didn't feel anything. Now I know at a systemic level, it's fighting inflammation and there are benefits inside the body, but I didn't feel clearer. I didn't feel more energy. I didn't feel less fatigue or whatever. I just didn't feel anything. I've had times where I was a little stronger in the gym and I had a little bit more cognitive. I slept better for 4, 5, 6 months, but everybody's different. But I would say with plasma exchange, I feel lighter. I feel, I don't know, lighter on my feet. It's the only way I can really kind of describe it in the best way. You just feel more vibrant, and you are getting a lot of the metabolic waste and the toxins and the antibodies and things out of your body. And so you can do that multiple times within a year. Some people do it once a quarter or, twice a year or something like that. I did it twice a year and I really liked it.
Is that a treatment that's legal in the United States?
It is legal in the United States. If you don't have an autoimmune condition and or a condition that requires and or is warranted or prescribed by therapeutic plasma exchange and therefore paid for by your insurance, you have to cash pay.
Right.
But you can get it. Probably if you look up TPE or therapeutic plasma exchange and Google it near me, you'll probably find some places near you that charge anywhere from probably $9,000 or $10,000 is probably the price point to get it. But yeah, you can do it because it is an FDA approved procedure for certain types of conditions. But you can also use it off-label use.
You said when you started the original clinic in Costa Rica, everything was relatively new. So if you're fast forwarding 10 years from now, I know you can't predict things, but with the advent of AI, with everything that's happening, how different is it going to be? Like science fiction different for us kind of thing,
Man, I don't know. I'll tell you, it's exciting though, because you have companies like AlphaFold and you saw what, David Sinclair lately has been, popping up in the memes again with some of the advancements that they're doing in his lab with age reversal. Dr. Wayne Marasco is a friend of mine, and I know what he's been doing. His lab's at Harvard Medical School at Dana-Farber, and I know what he's been doing up there and some of the things they're working on. And this is happening all over the world. There are things happening in labs we don't even know about. And then, of course, AI is going to just accelerate our capability and our understanding of these things. It's a really exciting time. This is, do you follow Peter Diamandis at all?
A little bit, but not really.
He's good friends with Ray Kurzweil, among a ton of other people. And Ray's been a future, technologist predictor for a long time and has been alarmingly correct and stuff. And they have this term called...
And he said singularity is going to be like in 6 or 7 years, right?
Right.
In 2033, we're going to live forever.
I mean, it's called escape velocity, right? And so,
Yeah.
What's hype and what's not. And I think there's a lot of confusion in the biohacking world and in the world people wake up, are our peptides good or are they bad or do they work? And is this going to, and because peptides are a huge craze right now, right? They're a huge rage. Everybody's trying to figure out how to get them and get good ones and not gray market. And why won't my doctor prescribe them? And, what happens if he does? Can he get in, so there's all this kind of crazy stuff going on in the world, in the quote longevity, sphere. Putting some good science to it, demyth, take the myth out of it, the mythology out of some of these things, and using good evidence-based science and medicine to help promote healthy aging is really at the core of everything. And some of it's a little sensationalized and overhyped, and some of it's not, and some of it we haven't even heard of yet. But, to predict what are we going to do in 10 years and where are we going to be? Man, who knows? I was talking about this. Imagine being a kid right now going to college and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, right? I was going to be a computer programmer. Well, those entry-level jobs are probably taken by AI, right? I mean, it's not happening. And I do believe that you'll see some of the other professional services like in accounting and contract law and things like that, where AI will probably take a lot of the tedious part of some of those professions away from some of the entry-level junior people that used to do it, as a first step in their careers. But imagine trying to become a doctor. I'm going to follow in the family footsteps and become a doctor. My dad, my uncle, my grandfather are all doctors. I want to be a doctor. Can you imagine taking on that kind of debt right now and that load, that expense to become a human, when guys like Elon Musk are telling you that we are literally 3, most likely 4 for some margin, years away from Optimus Prime replacing all surgeons, right? Or 95% of the surgeons, and doing a way better job.
Right, but he's also been telling us that Tesla taxis were going to take over the roads for the past 7 years or whatever, and I still haven't seen what. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I liked your notion of it because, what's interesting to me is when you pair it with identity, it's not just like, well, yeah, I do I'm kind of more willing to experiment on myself. So I'm doing the peptides and the stem cells, but I'm also meditating twice a day. And I'm also getting in the cold plunge and the sauna. Like I'm doing the 2,000-year-old treatments as well as the ones that are cutting edge. And it's more like I've never really thought about it as a whole. I look at it as part of who I want to be, as part of masculinity, because I'm oriented around that. In that part of what I'm trying to do is just be vital, because that's important for me. Vitality is important for me to be able to, well, go out and ski with my 18-year-old son, or hopefully when I have grandkids and all of that. And I think it's just like an all-in sort of attitude, right? There are many modalities that are thousands of years old that we shouldn't discard, in fact, really embrace, and we can pick and choose on what the new ones are. And I mean, it's a really exciting time to be alive and to orient towards this. And I think, I love the way you pairing it with additional meaning and purpose, because it's like, look at the untapped reservoir. We're almost 60. You've got this generation of people who have made more money, who have more assets, who've lived through so many things. And if you could turn them and say, like, well, what can I shift and take this next chapter, right? I mean, I really look at it like I remember myself really since I'm like 15. So 40 years of life is really like my memory. And I might have an entire lifetime in that frame ahead of me, 40 more years, right? And with the wisdom that I have, or the, at least more wisdom, but to be able to say, like, if I can stay vital during an entire Steve 2.0, like you talked about, like the mistakes that I don't have to, make, the contribution that I can make. So I'm not worried about being an addict now. Like there's so many things that I could say, like, okay. And I just think it's really inspiring. It really
It
is, like,
is.
can get you out of bed. And we were talking about the conversation with my son and daughter and all that. It's also, there was some part of it that was really kind of difficult for me, but like just hearing it and framing it in this, it's like, oh, okay. But I also have the opportunity to give them twice as much time as they've seen with the old Steve that was troubling with the new Steve if I stay healthy and I continue on my path. And so at the end of it, when it's all said and done, that's a chapter. And there's many more chapters ahead. I just feel vitalized and enthused in hearing it framed this way.
Yeah, it's you guys. You hit on some just amazing like nuggets, pearls right there. And so here's what I heard: the part about your kids and this next chapter, this next 40 or 50 years, right? And we struggled, right? Both of us had issues in earlier lives with trauma or with addiction or with other things. And look, that's just part of the path that we had to walk, right? And I'm good with it. But we've also done a lot of work in the last several years to try to learn and grow and heal and be of service and show up in a better way. What if you can take that understanding and that you said, the wisdom? The wisdom isn't having all the answers. The wisdom is having enough security to go back and be curious about where things might have been done differently or whatever, right? Like there's some wisdom in there too. But imagine 40 or 50 more years. That's where you start digging back into the purpose and the meaning. Feel like now I'm finally at a place at 59 where I figured a couple of things out. Like I know the journey's the whole thing and there's a lot more to figure out. But like I heard the other day, this concept, and I forgot who it was. I want to say it was Ramana, but they said, we think in our way of thinking, we've been taught, okay, work hard, then be happy. Happiness will follow. You work hard, you'll accumulate some things, you'll create happiness, right? It's like this algorithm. And they were talking about joy, and they said joy is fuel, not payment. Joy isn't something that you do, and I heard this maybe this will explain it better. There's that story, and I don't know if it's true or not, about Michelangelo where they said, hey, how did you look at this block of stone and see the David? And he's like, I didn't. I just removed everything that wasn't David until that's what was left, right? And I love that because I was thinking about us as people, right? How did you, wind up with this Greg? Well, I just removed all the things that weren't Greg, right? This goes back to that remembering who you are kind of, thing that's going on. I removed the fear and the shame and the guilt and the addiction and all the failures. And I just removed those things until what was left was me, this person asking the questions, right? Not a dad, not an entrepreneur, not a partner, not an addict, not a guy in recovery, me. And then it's like, okay, well, who's asking the questions? And I find that vastly more interesting now to think about than trying to arrive at the answer of, okay, how do I use these tools to do this and create that? Because I think if we're asking what I think are, for me at least, better questions, man, imagine 40 or 50 more years with this identity evolving in such a way that I believe we can, I can help and serve humanity, right? When Campbell talks about the hero's journey, right? The last stage of the journey is to come back and share, everybody, serve with what you've learned, right? When you go find the treasure, it doesn't end there. You got to come home and share the treasure with everybody. Like that's the last stage of the hero's journey with Campbell. So it's like, hey, remember who you are. And then Campbell would say, go out and become the person you're destined to be. And Ramana would say, before you do any of that, right, make sure you know who's asking the questions of who am I first, right? And it's all crazy, and it's a lot to think about.
I love the hero's journey aspect. He'll be on, I think, next week, but Dr. Ben Rogers, who's actually done a lot of research around the hero's journey. And, what's happened with me is I just have experimented on myself. And then what works, I'm like, is there science behind that? So I took this identity of the hero's journey and looking at the difficult times as just sort of my time out in the wilderness and fighting the dragons. I was researching it one day. I was like, is there any research about it? And there actually is. And University of North Carolina, they surveyed thousands of people. They created a hero's journey scale, essentially. So the real hero's journey has like 13 elements. They culled it down to 7. And, heeding the call and allies appear and, coming back and all of that. What they found that was really interesting is the people who told their life story in a way that comported most with the hero's journey scale had the most meaning, had the most life. I
Ah,
mean, their lives were the best, which I think is really cool. But what I thought was really interesting is for the people who didn't tell their story like that, but they taught them how to reframe their story and tell their own story in a series of simple exercises in the hero's journey lens. And then they went and surveyed them 6 months or a year later. And now those people had achieved the same meaning levels in their life that the people who naturally told their story the hero's journey way. And I think it's really important for us. I mean, he tapped into something that is, I just think, an aspect of the human experience that's been shown in really all cultures. And you can learn these things and you can have them impact your life positively. And I think it's a really good part of this whole thing because for me, I would say until my nervous system calmed down just a year and a half ago, I didn't really have place for purpose. Like my purpose was don't be an asshole to the people around me because that was what, where I was. And, I guess you talk to my kids and I failed that on sometimes, but like now I really feel energized by it. And it's a completely different way to live and to be able to combine it with some of the medical advances and just the way to think about things. It's not just medical research. Identity is very well proven to change behavior and change results. Hero's journey, I mean, you can engage in this whole thing for the purpose of living your life's purpose out, your soul's journey. And I think the physical aspect is obviously a very important part of it, but it's all one thing. And yeah, it's a really inspiring time. As much as it's fearful, there's a lot of fear out there of the unknown. It's what an inspiring time too.
well, we talked earlier about what am I unable to see, right? Because I'm so convinced that I already see so clearly. I think when you adopt that thought process, it gives you somewhere to go, right? If it's right or wrong, sort of binary, there's nowhere left to go, right? That's just wrong. But I mean, how awesome is that this is, you can open up into all this possibility. AI is a great example that can be polarizing, right? This is going to take over. It's scary. It's all this other stuff. But I think we have to be willing to sit in some of this uncertainty and know that when everything is familiar, from my experience, there's not a lot of opportunity and growth there, right? It's when things become unfamiliar and uncomfortable and uncertain that my ability to adapt start to get called upon. And that's where the excitement is, right? And you said something else that I just want to touch on without glossing over it. The cold plunges and the breath work and the meditation and the mindfulness and all the other things. And you and I both know this, this consciousness community pretty well. It's a huge piece of everything. Lifestyle is a big piece of it. Right. And when I talk lifestyle, I just mean sleep and exercise and nutrition and stress management and mindfulness and spiritual, right? We want to be whole. We want to be capable humans, physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. We need all of these. There's no magic bullet, no stem cell and no meditation and no singular breath work or anything is going to restore this madness. It takes time and it takes, practice. And they aggregate into these outcomes that I think favor those who say, I understand there's no easy button, quick path. I've done enough things, and my identity as a person, I am going to live healthier, potentially longer, and a deeper, more full, and a fuller life. That is who I am. I am this person. My behavior is evidence that I am this person, and that behavior then drives all the other outcomes that are more evidence and promote the confidence that this works. And I think this is where we're headed. It's an exciting time. I'll tell you that there's a lot of what I call the perfect storm. 1 in 5 people will be over the age of 60 by 2030. That's never happened before in the history of man. And that's in the US. And then it'll go into Europe and Asia. And the reason that's significant is as we age, our healthcare needs become more complex and more burdensome. So we're going to put a lot of stress and pressure on the systems, right? Whether the healthcare systems, the financial systems, because we have a lot of people entering that age group for the first time. Now, what's also happening, as you well know, there's a large, generational transfer of wealth that's happening. At the same time, science and technology and medicine are evolving and accelerating at such an unprecedented rate, and in part because of AI and with the help of AI. And then, of course, AI is exploding. So you have all of these convergences happening at once at a single time, where I think it's really, really exciting because we have to help people age healthier, right? Longer, because there are going to be a lot of people in that age, in those age brackets, the highest percentage of the population for the first time in history. So that's one of the reasons that you're seeing the advancements and the capital that's pouring into some of those endeavors. And it's exciting, right? It's exciting to be a part of, weeding through what's real and what's not. And that's part of the game, as it is in any industry that is evolving like this, or has evolved like this. And we'll get better at it. We'll get better at, fact and fiction, and we'll get better at discernment, and we'll get better at the science and providing more evidence and things like that. But it is an exciting time, and we should be open-minded and we should be curious, because the sky's the limit right now, man. This is a really exciting time to be older. There's some really smart people making some really big bets on where we're headed from a health standpoint in the next decade. It's crazy. So it's awesome.
I love it. As Amara comes into focus and opens next year, we will get you back on. Maybe we'll get you on while you're down there, so you can show us around a little bit, or I'll come down and visit you. But thank you so much. Let's do a live segment down there. Yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for being on 2 straight weeks. Really, inspired by both of our conversations in different ways. And I think they sort of led into each other. And, I come away with it thinking about, when we're scared, you talked about there's this binary sort of thought. I was a bad dad. I was a good dad, and what I sort of come through is here, the story is still being written. And so, live in the present and be what you can be now. And that involves all of this stuff. So I feel really blessed to have had you on, brother. Thank you so much for taking this time. I know you took a lot of time out for me and the people watching here. And thanks so much for being on, and I'll continue to follow you, and, I'm psyched to see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. I could talk to you forever and all day. It's an honor to be on, and I'm super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is the Neuro's Journey. We're here every Wednesday. Please subscribe if you're interested in conversations like this, trying to bring you something interesting and informative every week. See you next week.